Now that the neo-metaphysic target is clearer, it's time for us to work on our first painting. As we have seen in the Representative Oil Painting Fundamentals video course, the first part of every representative work is what we have called the painting definition, where we have to define the idea, that in our case has to be metaphysical. We have to study the subjects, arrange them inside the scene, choose the lighting, the point of view, the framing, the type, the shape, and the size of the support. In few words, all the decisions that, consciously or unconsciously, every painter has to make on the beginning of a new work. Here, as idea, we're going to use a symbolism, something I've been working for a while now. We're going to represent a mannequin going up on a stairway in the sky direction. Before we start working on the scene, we have to make some preliminary decisions. For example, on the subject. We have to choose what type of mannequin and what type of stairs we want to represent. And most of all, where we're going to set our scene. Out of the many possible types of mannequin that we could represent, there is one that has been used by the artists for a very long time. This type. So that's what we are going to use. Normally, most of these dummies are made in wood, but for this symbolism I want it to be transparent. It will also help us with the photographic representation, because, as we said, it will help our scene to be perceived as more realistic. Then, we have to choose what type of stairs we want to represent. Also in this case we have a large number of possible choices, but I think the most metaphysical one is made by steps floating in the void, with no railing. Also here we want it to be transparent. Then we have to choose the location where we want our scene to be represented. And here we have to start thinking like a photographer, eventually considering more than one. Since the stairway is going up to the sky, we want our location to be somewhere outdoor. So, we're going to choose 2 or 3 possible locations, and we're going to set our scene there. At the end, we're going to decide which one, by the visual point of view, represent our idea in the better way. It will also help if by now we have a good idea on the size and the shape of the support. For this painting, we're going to use a rectangular 80 by 100 centimeters canvas. Once we have made these preliminary decisions, we can start working on the scene. In the last video, we have seen 2 ways to carry out our models. The first was based on the photomontage, and the second on the 3D editing. We can't really use the first because both stairs and dummy are transparent, and as we have seen, we are gonna get some problem if we try. So we have to use the second method, the 3D editing. To get a realistic job is not really easy. We need to be able to use very complicated programs. So here, we will just quickly see by the theoretical point of view the main steps that we should do to carry out our model. The first thing we need is a spherical photo of all the locations that we have considered for our scene. For example, like this one. We can shoot them directly by ourselves using a spherical camera like this one, or in alternative, we can download them from the internet. There are many websites online offering this type of service. Some are free, like for example Text35, where I've downloaded this one for example, and in others we have to pay. Once we have got the locations, like a photographer would do, we need to bring there all the subjects that we want to use for our shooting. And since we have an idea on what we want to represent, but we haven't got our subjects yet, we have to find them. Also in this case, we can draw them by ourselves or find them online. Here, we're going to draw them. The advantage is that we don't need to settle for the things that we find, but we can actually get them exactly like we want. Like, for example, on the stairs, where we're going to draw all the steps floating in the void. Now, like we did for the representative painting, we have to arrange our subjects inside the scene. We're going to represent the dummy on the stairs with one foot up and one down on two different steps. Eventually, if we want, we can move the arms and adjust all the things that we need to get the scene exactly like we want. Once the subjects are ready before we actually start shooting, we need to do a few other things. As first, we have to set the spherical image as environment and find the right spot to set our scene. Then, we need to assign to every subject a material. In this case, it's easy. We're going to choose the glass for all of them to make them transparent. Now, according with the location that we have chosen, we have to set a consistent lighting on the scene. And it's important that we make sure that if we change the place, we also reset the lighting. Finally, once also the lighting is fixed, our scene is complete and we can start shooting our Neo-metaphysic scene. Here, we really need to think like a photographer, going around the scene, choosing the right spot with the best point of view, where the light is exactly like we want. Eventually, if we don't like something, we can adjust the scene, moving all the details in the right position. Once we are ready, before we start shooting, we have to decide what type of photographic effects we want to represent in our scene. For example, here I want to try something I haven't tried yet. I would like to work on the exposure blurring, getting the dummy on focus and the background blurry. A photographer would work on the camera settings, bringing the focus right on the dummy, choosing the shortest exposure time and the widest shutter aperture. We can't, or it's really difficult to do all these things here, but as we said, we're going to get the best image that we can out of the 3D editor, and then we're going to try to get all the photographic effects later using a photo editor. Let's say, for example, that this is the photo that we want to shoot. To get our picture out of this program, we need to make a render, where the software, making millions of different calculations based on the geometries, the light, the materials, and other parameters, is going to represent it for us. And this is how it looks at the end. Unfortunately, the settings of the program that we are using allow us to get only a uniform blur on the background, while we have seen that in a real photo the level of blur depends from the distance. So here we're going to use a trick. As first, we're going to get two renders. In one, we're going to add some blur on the background, while on the other, we're going to set the background on focus. In this way, although the transparent objects are on focus, we're going to have some blur inside their projected images as well. At this point, we're going to leave the 3D editor to work with the photo editor, where in a single document, we're going to open both our renders, and we're going to set the one with the blurry background on top. Then, we're going to cut the dummy off this layer and paste it on a new one. And we're going to do the same thing with the stairs. Once we cancel the rest of the scene, which is the blurry background that we don't want, we get in this situation with the dummy and the stairs on focus projecting a blurred scene and the background on focus. Now we can start working on the background. As first, we're going to make a copy of the complete bottom image with the background on focus, and then on the top one we're going to cut dummy and stairs off. we're going to make 3 copies on 3 different layers in order to have 4 of them. Then, for each of the 4 backgrounds, we have to define a different area of the picture with a different progressive distance from our point of view, with the farthest on the bottom and the closest on the top. Now, we're going to cut those areas off. To do it, we're going to do a clean cut on the bottom, while on the top, it's important that while we follow the border line, if we find people or objects standing with one part inside this area, that we keep those inside. So we have to go around them. And we're going to do the same thing with the other layers. Now, starting from the bottom layer, which is the farthest part of the background, we're going to apply a Gaussian blur filter. In this case, it must be the largest value. Then, we're going to work on the other 3 areas, making sure that while we get close to our point of view, progressively, we're going to reduce the amount of blur in order to have the lowest amount on the closest area. If we turn the render on the bottom of the one with the background on focus that we left there untouched, this is what we're going to see. So, to avoid this problem, we're going to turn it back on. Now, if we compare the render that we have got out of the 3D editor with a uniform background with this picture we just did, we can notice that in this second, the photographic representation looks more realistic. There is another thing that we could change to let our model looks even more realistic. In fact, there is a certain distance between the farthest part of the stairs and the dummy, and this means that that part shouldn't be perfectly on focus. So we're going to go to the stairs layer, we're going to select the farthest steps, and we're going to apply a small blur. Eventually, at this point, if we want, we can change a little bit the exposure, working on the lightness and the contrast levels. But actually, I like it, so I'm not going to change anything. The only thing that we have to do is to save this image. We have to follow this procedure with all the renders we made with different backgrounds and scene setups. In this case, we made these 3 with 3 different backgrounds and points of view. Exactly like a real photographer would do, now within these 3 pictures we have to decide which one we are going to print. I honestly think that among them this one is the one that I like most, also because there is this bridge that fits really well with my original idea. So this one is the one we're going to use. Before we start working on this idea, there is the last part of the painting definition that we have to do, the framing, where we have to decide what portion of this image we're going to represent in our painting. Since this image framing is very close to the one that we want to paint, we're going to do this job later directly on the canvas when we're going to work on the sketch. This introduction on the Neo-metaphysic painting definition is complete now. In the next video, we're going to see the things that we have to do to paint this picture. If you enjoyed this video, we will really appreciate if you could click on like and subscribe to our channel. It will also help us very much if you could leave a comment. Thank you for watching this video and see you in the next one.